I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and today I'm out here on a pretty foreboding autumn day in Sydney to drive BMW's new third generation X3. The X3 is BMW's bestseller here in Australia, and it's not hard to see why, because it competes in the very relevant luxury medium SUV segment alongside the likes of the Mercedes-Benz GLC, Audi Q5 and Land Rover Discovery Sport. Well, this is the third X3. It now looks a lot more like its big brother, the X5, which I think is a good thing. And I think it particularly looks better than the second generation version that it replaces. And that's a theme that carries on inside, as the X3 has received many of the interior components and styling of the larger 5 Series, which is a car that we rate really highly here. Now, the X3 is available with a variety of 4 and 6 cylinder engines under the bonnet. This one is the one that BMW expect will be the most popular version. It's the xDrive 30i, so all-wheel drive plus a 185 kilowatt turbo 4-cylinder petrol. This particular car is in X-Line trim, which is something BMW are now doing on their SUVs. You can get a more rugged looking X-Line or a sportier M Sport package on this car. I like the way this particular one looks, especially in silver over brown leather. Now, a family car is really all about the flexibility of that interior, so that's where we'll start in talking about whether the BMW X3 deserves to take out class honours. If you've watched our reviews of the new BMW 5 Series, the X3's cabin will be immediately familiar, because after driving this car for about a week, in both appearance and in material quality, the X3 feels about 85% of the way to a 5 Series, and that's a good position for this car to be in, especially when you consider that the X3 is about $30,000 cheaper than the equivalent 5 Series. So on the face of it, this interior looks like pretty good value. BMW's cabins don't go for the wow factor visually, they leave that to rivals like Mercedes-Benz. Instead, BMW interiors are all about simplicity and quality, and in some ways I really prefer that. So looking at the way this X3's cabin is laid out, it's not that different to any other BMW. However, the design has received a few incremental changes since the last car in terms of how it presents. So it's just a little bit cleaner, a bit more modern with the angles on some of the trim pieces on the dash, and the quality of the materials in particular has taken a big step up. The dashboard is very soft. There's soft touch material where your leg rests, on the doors. Even the front facings of parts like the glove box are soft in this car, which is great. There's a creamy leather steering wheel lifted straight out of the 5 Series, a cushy centerpiece here where you can rest your arm, and in fact this car's driving position is awesome. It's high set, as people like in an SUV, but the seat is extremely comfortable. There's adjustable side bolstering, an adjustable leg extender, 4-way lumbar, everything you need to get really, really comfortable. The steering wheel itself isn't electrically adjustable, but that's not really that big of a problem. And there are 2 memory settings for the seat and the mirrors, so couples are well taken care of. There's a very good view out, excellent visibility in the X3. Looking further afield, the center console is based around a 10.25-inch touchscreen, BMW's latest iDrive 6 software. It is a touchscreen, so you can navigate it that way if you like, or with the traditional iDrive rotary dial between the seats, which we still prefer on the move. You can get an optional Harman Kardon stereo that sounds great as well. While we understand that features like a full-length panoramic sunroof do have to remain on the options list, we're a little bit concerned that there are a couple of features in the new X3 in Australia that are cost options that shouldn't be. For example, heated seats being optional at this level, that seems a little bit cheap when there are plenty of mainstream cars that have that technology for free. Ditto Apple CarPlay, which costs over $600 in this car, and we just don't know why. Practicality though is excellent. There's a very large central bin between the seats, unusual in a BMW, big cup holders, a wireless charging pad, and large door bins as well. One feature I do like in the X3 is that BMW have given themselves a couple of flourishes with design in the cabin. There's an X3 embossed plate here underneath the center console, and really cool X's that you can see when you open the doors, and they're mirrored in the actual sill of the car too. The X3's doors may not open to 90 degrees, but they do open wide enough in order to fit a child seat with relative ease, and that's also made better by the fact that the doors continue straight along. There's no coupe-esque sloping roofline in this car. That will arrive with the X4 coupe SUV, which is just a version of the X3 a little bit later on. The benefit of driving the wagon body SUVs in the BMW lineup is that there's a lot more passenger space and a bigger boot, and that's why I prefer the X3 to the X4, the X5 to the X6, and so on, but that's just my preference. Room in the back of the new X3 is really good, despite the fact that we've got the optional panoramic sunroof here. As a 6-footer, I've got heaps of headroom, really good legroom, and awesome tow room sitting behind myself with the driver's seat in its lowest position set for me. So room back here is no issue whatsoever. The X3 is pretty wide, so you can actually fit 3 people, especially because the middle seat doesn't actually have a hump in it, and the hump in the floor for the drive shaft is pretty small. There are air vents and a separate temperature zone back here, which is great, and you can get heated rear seats as an option, although this car doesn't have that. What this car does have, like every X3, is a flip-down armrest with a pair of good-sized cup holders in it, and there are further bottle holders in the doors that are pretty good in this car. Plus, the soft-touch materials do extend to the back, so it's nice and luxurious here in the second row of the BMW X3. One of the amazing things about cars in 2018 is just how similar some of the competitors really are, and that couldn't be more true for luxury medium SUVs, where many of them have exactly the same boot capacity. So the X3 has 550 litres of space in the back. That's exactly the same as both the Mercedes GLC and the Audi Q5, although that trio have a bit more space than the XC60 at 505 litres. It's a pretty clever boot as well. So firstly, it's a great square shape, which will mean that it's really easy to pack full of lots of bags. The load height is low and there's no lip, so you can slide heavy suitcases straight in and out of the X3. There's some netting on the left-hand side to keep any delicate items from rolling around. Handy tie-down points that you can slide fore and aft in the boot. And you can get lots of accessories for this boot as well, like a cargo net in order to keep things on that floor. Plus, in a really great feature, you can lift up the boot floor, which is actually on gas struts, so it won't fall on you while you're loading the underfloor storage. Plus, there are 2 shopping bag hooks in the back of the X3 as well, so that is what we call a job well done. So what's the new X3 like to drive? Well, on first impressions, it's more like the new 5 Series than the existing 3 Series behind the wheel. And that's a comment that means a few things. Firstly, it means the X3 feels really quiet and refined. So this car has virtually no road noise that manages to filter through to the cabin, and that's despite the fact that it's riding on relatively large 20-inch wheels that are in Bridgestone Alenza tyres. They're grippy enough, but surprisingly for such a big wheel and tyre package, they're really quiet. Wind noise and engine noise are also equally impressively restrained in this car. The second thing that it means is that the X3 is more relaxed than sporty to drive, and for most people that are looking for a luxurious family SUV, that'll be perfect. But what it equally means, on the other hand, is that the X3 isn't a traditional BMW in the sense that you don't jump behind the wheel and it immediately conveys an atmosphere of performance and sporty driving. Instead, this is a pretty laid-back car. To be fair, this isn't one of the most powerful X3s. The 30i is an everyday model, making 185 kilowatts of power and 350 newton meters of torque. Certainly adequate, but not lightning fast. You can get faster X3s and slower ones. There's a 30D with a large 6-cylinder diesel engine that makes 620 newton meters of torque. There's a 6-cylinder petrol coming. There's a 4-cylinder diesel and a lower powered version of the 4-cylinder petrol as well. So there's a good amount of choice in the X3 range. However, my recommendation is that if you don't have a pressing need for heaps and heaps of torque, i.e. you don't plan on doing lots of country driving, and fuel economy isn't your absolute first consideration, the 30i is the engine I'd go for. It's really quiet, incredibly smooth, nice and linear, and the fuel economy in town of about 11.5 litres per 100 Ks isn't that bad. Otherwise, the X3 is a comfortable car to drive around. The suspension, if you option the dynamic damper control, is pretty comfortable. It's best just to leave the car in comfort mode, where body motion is constrained pretty well and the car floats over most kinds of urban bumps nicely, even on the 20-inch wheels. The steering is nice and quick. There's not a huge amount of feel coming from the rear end, but the steering is still quick enough and direct enough. The xDrive all-wheel drive system, if you go for an X3 with that feature, is quick to respond, with the front wheels engaging on slippery days like the ones we've been experiencing over the last couple here in Sydney. And finally, the handling itself is kept well in check, especially with the dynamic dampers. If you throw the car into its sports mode, it ties it down nicely, although ride quality does suffer as a result. Like the 5 Series, the X3 is also available with a number of adaptive safety technologies. This particular car has the whole package. And one thing I've noticed is that they're really well tuned. So I've had the entire safety suite switched on this week, which is rare for me. I usually get fed up with overly invasive lane keep assist features in particular. However, in the X3, they've been really well done, and I've barely even noticed the fact that the systems are switched on because the intervention is really intelligent and only comes in when you really are floating properly out of your lane rather than simply approaching the line as it does in some cars. So that's my opinion of the new BMW X3. For a car that wears the BMW roundel, the X3 could be a touch sportier, but this car surprises in how well it nails the quiet, comfortable premium SUV brief. I like the way the new X3 looks and feels outside and in, and if you don't go crazy on options, you can walk out the door with a very nice example like this for about 90 grand. Not too bad. But the luxury SUV segment is pretty competitive, so make sure you test drive the X3 plus the Q5, GLC and XC60 at a minimum before putting your money down on any of these cars.